Hello, everybody. So I'm back in our test portal here. And when I say workflow settings, I'm referring to this settings tab here. Yeah, so this settings tab here. And this would apply more for like nurture sequences, or I mean, typically for a workflow like this, if you missed it, this is a workflow that's created to, if someone fills out a form on your HubSpot, one of your HubSpot landing pages, or just one of your HubSpot forms, it will automatically enroll them into your Zoom workflow without having to have them go to zoom.com or zoom.us or wherever you're located, having them go to the Zoom's website and submit another form. So it's just really to make the conversion very smooth and have it set so that they don't need to leave your website in order to get added and registered to your Zoom webinars. And this would make more sense for a nurture sequence. So, I'm going to go ahead and create a new one just so it applies to the workflow that I'm actually working with here. So the workflow, we're going to call this nurture test. I guess we don't need to name it test. It's in the test portal here. I'm going to start from scratch. So talk a little bit about the enrollment triggers to start. The most common enrollment triggers that I'm using for is usually going to be a list membership. So if they're a member of your nurture list, sometimes if it's like a post, a follow-up workflow for an event, a live digital event of some sort, or even any kind of lead magnet, you can also have form submission is another big one. So let's say you had a landing page set up with a form on it that when someone filled out the form, they got an ebook, a PDF, a newsletter. I mean, a newsletter would probably come in an email, but some sort of lead magnet or content that benefits them. You can then set the trigger for like a post nurture sequence or post nurture or follow-ups for that lead magnet. You can set the enrollment trigger as that form. I mean, it's very basic, and I'm sure that a lot of you already know that, but I figured I would cover that just for now. And so typically the way I set it up is, actually, I can even go back a step further, because if it's event based, and this is something that I didn't use for a long time, but I wish I would have, center it on a date, because that way you know exactly when the emails are going out. And if you're using form submission as the trigger for your workflow, people aren't going to get like multiple emails at once if they fill out a form and they're in another workflow, or this way that there's a date that you know when each email is going out. But you do need to be careful when you're doing this, because let's say I set the date for this workflow, the whole workflow will be centered around this. So you can do things before or after. But if the time has already passed for your first, so your delays will look different in a workflow like this. So let's say we want the first action to happen on the 12th. The day after the 11th, we want it to be at 12:15. And then we'll say send an email. I don't know that I have any emails. We have any emails built in this. Yeah, we don't. So for the sake of saving, I mean, I guess I don't need to save time necessarily, but for the sake of simplifying things, we're just going to say that there'd be maybe an email send after this, or any of these actions really. If there is an email that's going to be sent and this time has already come, this March 11th at 12:15 time has already come, and you launch this workflow, after that, it'll automatically skip over the first step. So if you had an email and then you had another delay after that, it'll jump right to the second part. And that's something that a lot of people, at least I don't catch sometimes, because sometimes we'll set up a date-based workflow, and originally we had a date planned for a certain event or a certain launch date, but then it got pushed back, and we don't always, if you don't remember to go in and actually change these individual delays, you have to basically kill the workflow, clone it, and build a new one centered on a new date. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, the big thing that I wanted to cover, I guess, was settings. And and this will be in a non-date based. You can do it in date based as well, but in that one, you're actually selecting the times that you want your emails to go out. But in this case, if you just want to say like, oh, I want it's only for a certain amount of time. I want it to go out every 5 days. I want an email to go out. So we do here, then it would be followed with a send email, and then another delay for another 5 days until the next email. But you also, if the enrollment's something where it's like an active list where people are still getting added in after you launched it, you want to make sure that you aren't sending them, you're at least aware of the times that you're sending them emails. So this is when you would go into the general settings here and you would go to select, like oftentimes we'll do Monday through Friday, and we'll make sure it's within business hours. Or in some cases, we've actually found that it works better to do it outside of business hours, but that's a different story for probably a good topic that Tom would cover, because he's really good at finding times where all of the large corporations and other, I guess, agencies, marketing agencies, other businesses, there's like this set time that people think you should send emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because that's when people are really checking their emails. But if he's found, and I found too, that if you send them sometimes on like Saturdays or Sundays or just odd times of the day, you actually can get a higher open rate, which is a neat little tip that I definitely think you guys should try if it's applicable to you. I want to make sure no one's joined. One of these days, we're going to have our time set and I'm going to have some people joining. But then anyway, back to this. So yeah, the specific times here, you're going to want to save it, and you can add other times too if you want to add hours here, like specific hours of different days, or like maybe even dates. This is actually a new beta feature. I haven't actually used this one, but I think that is very interesting. So yeah, you can make it annual, or you want it to actually execute on certain dates, which is actually super cool. I'm glad that they added this. And then you can associate it with whatever campaign this falls into. Also in the settings is the unenrollment and suppression. So a lot of times when you have, as you get more and start using HubSpot more and more and get more comfortable with building workflows and setting automation, you'll sometimes have overlapping triggers. So these triggers here, you'll have multiple, whether it's a subscription type or some sort of list membership, you can have overlapping triggers, which can cause people to get enrolled and sometimes get multiple emails, enrolled in multiple workflows, and sometimes get multiple emails at the same time or on the same days. Like it's really not the best practice to have people receiving, like in some cases you could have like 4 emails from the same company within an hour, depending on how you set up all your workflows. So that's what this unenrollment and suppression is really good for. There's the suppression down here where you can create a list of like, and a lot of times we'll do like an employee suppression list. We have that added on all of the workflows so that no one internally, unless it's someone that actually needs to see it, we can create like a master exclude where we use a filter based on the domain at Web Canopy Studio. And then you can add that there and save it. And then there's also this do not enroll or do not remove them from other workflows. So this is the one that'll come pre-selected no matter what. But you can also go through and remove them from all the other workflows, or actually select specific workflows that you don't want them to be in anymore. So if you have like an MQL workflow, or you had like a lead workflow it's very top of funnel content that you're putting in your emails, and then you have a middle of funnel where you're trying to push, or a middle or bottom of funnel, and you're trying to push them towards maybe booking a call, and it's the email language is much more direct, one-to-one. This is when you would want to make sure that you are removing them from the other workflows. So you would go through and actually select the workflow, and then make sure that you save, because I've done this a few times myself where I'll go through and change all these settings, including in the general, as well as like tagging it with a campaign. And then because the way that it auto saves everywhere else, you don't always think to hit the save button here, but it will not update if you don't. So make sure you do that. And then this is the enrollment conditions here. If you have like an active list, and maybe it's a lead scoring list where they have, and I covered lead scoring, I think probably a month ago now. So you can go back and watch that if you're wondering how we use lead scoring lists. But if they reach a certain score and they move to a different list, or they reach a different score, maybe that's your trigger to get them enrolled here. you're going to want to either choose whether or not you want to keep them in the workflow or remove them. Because it'll naturally be no. That's what it'll load as automatically. So this is what it comes saved as. And then this is the when two contacts are merged, should the newly created contact enroll in this workflow if they meet the trigger criteria? So it's no. And I guess there are use cases for when it should be yes, but generally that one's going to be no. So I want to see if anybody just knowing like what edits had happened to this workflow exactly. Like you can actually go and view the revisions, the different revisions, and then when it's live, you can see the action logs where you can filter by like why were there errors with your workflow? Something happened where somebody couldn't be enrolled, or they couldn't meet the end goal for errors or retries. There's all these different types of actions as well. They'll list them here. So yeah, it's good to get familiar with all of this, because it seems like when you get used to creating workflows, sometimes you just breeze past this stuff, but it's always good to like this is a new feature here. It's always good to just make sure you're checking this and make sure that you are up to date with this kind of stuff. It can only benefit you. So that's pretty much all I have to talk about. I hope that you guys found this helpful once again. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and week.